https://youtube.be/6fe8t9 C=Yajmanbotikukzadam Schiff made one fatal mistake. He underestimated the man with the southern draw. You won't believe what happened next. Adam Schiff stood in the packed Senate Oversight Committee hearing room, his designer suit catching the harsh fluorescent lights as he pointed an accusatory finger directly at Senator John Kennedy. The California congressman's voice rang with prosecutorial certainty, each word carefully calibrated for the cameras that lined the back wall like a firing squad. Senator Kennedy. Schiff began, his tone dripping with the kind of moral superiority that had made him a darling of cable news. You represent everything wrong with the old guard in Washington. The kind of politics that puts party over country. The kind of senator who undermines our sacred institutions for cheap political points. The gallery erupted in applause. Progressive activists who had lined up before dawn to secure seats jumped to their feet waving signs that read "Truth to Power" and "Accountability Now." The media section was a frenzy of activity, reporters from CNN, MSNBC, The New York Times, and The Washington Post typing furiously on their laptops. Their headlines already half-written. Schiff confronts Kennedy. California progressive takes down Louisiana conservative. The reckoning. Schiff was just getting warmed up. He gestured dramatically toward Kennedy, channeling every courtroom performance he'd ever given. Your constant questioning of the Department of Justice. Your baseless attacks on the FBI. Your conspiracy theories about the intelligence community. You're not conducting oversight, Senator. You're conducting a witch hunt. You're tearing down the very institutions that keep Americans safe. The activists cheered louder. Several held up their phones. Streaming the confrontation lived to thousands of followers. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. Adam Schiff, the hero of the resistance, finally putting that backward Southern senator in his place. But Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana sat quietly at the witness table, seemingly unbothered by the theatrical display unfolding before him. His silver hair was perfectly styled. His wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. His charcoal suit pressed to perfection. And there, just barely visible at the corner of his mouth, was that slight upturn, that ghost of a smile. The smile of someone who knew something no one else in the room did. On the table in front of him sat a manila folder. Closed, unopened, waiting. Several observers in the room, the more experienced Washington hands, noticed that folder. They noticed Kennedy's unusual calm. They noticed that smile. And they felt the first stirrings of unease. Schiff continued his assault, his voice rising to a crescendo. The American people deserve better than your partisan games. Senator Kennedy, they deserve representatives who respect our institutions, who honor our intelligence community, who put truth above politics. They deserve, thank you, Congressman. Kennedy interrupted his Louisiana draw so smooth and unhurried it was almost jarring in the midst of Schiff's fury. The two words, thank you, hung in the air, polite yet somehow devastating in their gentleness. The room went quiet, not completely silent, but quiet enough that you could hear the subtle shift in atmosphere like air pressure changing before a storm. Kennedy leaned forward slightly, his hands folded on the table in that distinctly Southern gentleman pose, patient, courteous, entirely at ease. Thank you for that passionate opening statement. I do appreciate passion, Congressman. It shows that someone cares deeply about their beliefs. He paused, letting that word believes linger just a moment too long, imbuing it with just the slightest hint of doubt. You mentioned institutions. Kennedy continued his draw, making every word last just a bit longer than necessary. And truth. Two very important things. So, let's talk about those things. Shall we? Let's talk about institutions and truth. His hand moved to the manila folder. Every camera in the room zoomed in. Every reporter stopped typing. Every activist in the gallery leaned forward. Kennedy opened the folder with deliberate slowness, the sound of paper sliding against paper somehow loud in the suddenly tense room. He pulled out a single sheet, held it up to the light, examined it as if seeing it for the first time. You mentioned putting country over party, Congressman Schiff, Kennedy said, his voice, still gentle, still polite, still wrapped in that Southern courtesy that was beginning to feel more like a velvet glove over an iron fist. Interesting words, very noble words, the kind of words that sound good on television. He set the paper down, looked directly at Schiff, and the smile, that slight knowing smile, grew just a fraction wider. Perhaps, Kennedy said, his voice dropping to that register that made people lean in to listen. We should discuss your own relationship with truth. Mr. Chairman, your own relationship with institutions. Your own record of putting country over party. Another pause. This one longer. More deliberate. The tension in the room was palpable now. Even Schiff's supporters in the gallery had gone quiet. Uncertain. Let's start. Kennedy continued, pulling another document from the folder with what you told the American people about Russian collusion. The room went completely silent. The kind of silence that follows a bomb dropping. The kind of silence where everyone suddenly realizes that what they thought was going to happen isn't going to happen at all. That the script has been flipped. That the hunter has become the hunted. Adam Schiff's confident expression flickered just for a moment. Just a fraction of a second. But Kennedy saw it. And everyone else in that room saw it. Too. The trap had been set. And Schiff had walked right into it. Kennedy reached into his folder and pulled out a stack of transcripts. Each one carefully tabbed with colored markers. The methodical precision of it. The organization. The preparation. The clear evidence of hundreds of hours of work sent a chill through the Democratic side of the room. Congressman Schiff. Kennedy began his draw, transforming the name into 3 distinct syllables. I want to take us back to 2017. March of 2017 to be precise. Do you remember March of 2017? Schiff opened his mouth to respond. But Kennedy held up a hand. Polite, gentle, but firm. Let me refresh your memory. March 20th, 2017. You appeared on MSNBC on the Morning Joe program. Kennedy held up the first transcript. Showed it to the cameras. You were asked directly whether you had evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. Your exact words were, he read slowly, carefully, we have evidence of collusion. Butter. Kennedy sat that transcript down with a soft thud that somehow echoed in the silent room. April 6, 2017. CNN Anderson Cooper's show. Another transcript came out of the folder. You said, and I quote, we have more than circumstantial evidence. Another transcript. May 8, 2017. ABC News This Week program. You said there is direct evidence of collusion. The pattern was emerging. Kennedy's voice never changed. Still that gentle, almost lazy draw, but with each transcript, each quote, each claim, the weight in the room grew heavier. June 2, 2017, MSNBC. Again, you said the evidence was in plain sight. July 19, CNN. You said you'd seen evidence that was damning. August 27, NBC News. You said the evidence was incontrovertible. Kennedy kept going. September, October, November, December. Month after month, network after network, show after show, each time Adam Schiff had claimed, not suggested, not implied, but flatly claimed, that he had seen evidence of collusion. Finally, Kennedy sat down the last transcript and pulled out a thick document bound and tabbed. This, Congressman, is a compilation my staff put together. Every television appearance you made between January 2017 and March 2019 where you claimed to have evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. He held up the document. It was easily a 100 pages thick. 103 separate occasions. Mr. Chairman. 103 times you went on national television and told the American people that you had evidence. Direct evidence. Circumstantial evidence. Damning evidence. Incontrovertible evidence. Evidence in plain sight. Kennedy set the compilation down, folded his hands, and looked directly at Schiff with those pale blue eyes that suddenly seemed much less gentle. So, let's see it. Mr. Chairman, you've had 6 years now. Special Counsel Mueller finished his investigation. The Senate Intelligence Committee finished theirs. The Inspector General finished his review. The Durham investigation is complete. All those reports are public now. He leaned forward slightly. Show us the evidence. Congressman Schiff. Show this committee. Show the American people. The evidence you claimed to have. The evidence you promised existed. The evidence you said proved collusion. The silence was deafening. Adam Schiff's face had gone from confident to guarded. His hands, which had been gesturing so dramatically during his opening statement, now gripped the edge of the table. The evidence was classified at the time. Schiff began his voice, not quite as strong as before. Was Congressman. Kennedy pounced on the word like a cat on a mouse. Past tense was classified, meaning it's not classified anymore. Meaning we can all see it now. Schiff's lawyers leaned in, whispering urgently. But Kennedy wasn't done. Because here's the interesting thing. Mr. Chairman, Kennedy pulled out another document. This one thicker with an official government seal on the cover. This is Special Counsel John Durham's report. 48 pages. 4 years of investigation. Millions of dollars spent. Hundreds of witnesses interviewed. He flipped through the pages, his finger racing lines of text. The conclusion, for those who haven't read it, is quite clear. The investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. That's on page 1 of Volume 1 of the Mueller report. Actually, but Durham went further. Kennedy found his place. Began reading. Neither U.S. law enforcement nor the intelligence community appears to have possessed any actual evidence of collusion in their holdings at the commencement of the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. And that's the FBI investigation that started this whole thing for those keeping track at home. He looked up. No actual evidence. Mr. Chairman, the Durham report is quite explicit about this. The predicate for the investigation was insufficient. The Steele dossier, which you cited repeatedly on television, was uncorroborated opposition research paid for by the Clinton campaign. The FBI knew this and opened an investigation. Anyway, Kennedy closed the Durham report, set it aside, and pulled out yet another document. This one had classification markings. Recently declassified, the kind of document that made everyone in the room sit up straighter. But here's the part one find most fascinating. Congressman Kennedy's voice had lost all its gentleness now. It was hard, sharp, prosecutorial. This is declassified testimony from the Intelligence Community Inspector General. Testimony given to Congress in a closed classified session on March 15, 2017. And he held it up so the cameras could capture the official seals. The authentication marks. The declassified stamp in red ink. This testimony describes a briefing given to the Gang of Eight. That's you, Mr. Chairman, as the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee at the time. Plus the other congressional leaders with access to our most sensitive intelligence. The briefing took place on March 8, 2017. Kennedy read from the document his Louisiana draw, making every word strike like a hammer blow. The Gang of Eight was briefed that the ongoing investigation had to date found no evidence of collusion, coordination, or conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russian government officials. The briefing included the assessment that while Russian interference in the election was confirmed, no credible evidence had emerged of Trump campaign involvement. He set the document down gently, almost reverently, as if it were a holy text. March 8, 2017. Congressman Schiff, you were briefed in an official classified setting that there was no evidence of collusion. Kennedy pulled up that first transcript again. March 20, 2017. 12 days later, you went on MSNBC and told America you had evidence of collusion. The room erupted. Republicans were demanding answers. Democrats were frantically whispering to each other. The media was in full frenzy mode. And the progressive activists in the gallery, the ones who had been cheering so loudly just minutes before, sat in stunned silence. Kennedy raised his voice slightly to be heard over the chaos. You were briefed that there was no evidence. Mr. Chairman, you saw the raw intelligence. You had access to everything the FBI had, everything the CIA had, everything the NSA had. You knew with absolute certainty that there was no evidence of collusion. His voice dropped back to that deadly quiet register, and you went on television anyway 103 times. You lied to the American people. You used your position as chairman of the Intelligence Committee to give credibility to a lie. You used your access to classified information that explicitly contradicted what you were saying to push a political narrative. Kennedy leaned back in his chair, his hands folded again in that patient Southern gentleman pose. That's not a mistake, Mr. Chairman. That's not a difference of interpretation. That's not putting the evidence together differently than someone else might. He paused. Let the moment breathe. Let the weight of it settle on everyone in that room. That's a lie. A deliberate, calculated, repeated lie told to the American people for 2 years. Adam Schiff's face had gone pale. His earlier confidence had evaporated completely. He tried to respond, his mouth moving, but his voice came out wrong. Too high, too defensive. I stand by the work of the committee. We conducted thorough oversight. Do you stand by your statements on television, Mr. Chairman? Kennedy interrupted his voice. Gentle again, but somehow more devastating for it. Do you stand by saying you had direct evidence when you'd been briefed that no evidence existed? Do you stand by lying to the American people? Schiff's lawyers were both whispering urgently now. But he waved them off a gesture that looked more panicked than confident. The intelligence I saw led me to believe. You just said you stand by your statements, Kennedy noted. But now you're saying you believed something. Which is it, Mr. Chairman? Did you have evidence as you claimed on 103 occasions? Or did you just believe something despite being told by the intelligence community that no evidence existed? No good answer existed. Schiff knew it. His lawyers knew it. Everyone in that room knew it. One of the Democratic committee members, a senior congressman who had served with Schiff for years, quietly gathered his papers and walked out. Just stood up and left. The cameras caught it. The symbolic weight of it crashed through the room like a wave. Kennedy noticed. Of course, he noticed. That slight smile returned. But the Russia hoax is just the beginning. Mr. Chairman. He reached for another section of his folder. This one even thicker than the last. Let's discuss how you leaked classified information to your friends in the media. Let's discuss how you weaponized the Intelligence Committee's access to our nation's secrets for political gain. Adam Schiff's hands were shaking now just slightly. Just enough that anyone watching closely could see. And everyone was watching closely. Let's talk about the 43 times classified information from Intelligence Committee briefings appeared in the media within 24 hours. Always benefiting the anti-Trump narrative. Always from anonymous sources. Always untraceable. Kennedy's voice was hard as steel now. Let's talk about you being a leaker. Mr. Chairman. The room held its breath. This was about to get much worse. Kennedy's fingers traced the edge of the thick folder before him. Taking his time, letting the tension build. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a new weight. This wasn't just about lies anymore. This was about crimes. Congressman Schiff, I want to walk everyone through a pattern. A very specific, very troubling pattern that emerged between 2017 and 2019. He pulled out a color-coded chart large enough that the cameras could capture it clearly. Dates running down the left side, events in the middle, media publications on the right. Lines connecting them all in a damning web. January 10, 2017. The House Intelligence Committee holds a classified briefing on the Russia investigation. Present in the room, the gang of 8 committee leadership and senior staff with top-secret clearances. The briefing includes signals intelligence. That's intercepts of communications for those watching at home. And human intelligence from sensitive sources. Kennedy moved his finger down the chart. January 11, 2017. Less than 24 hours later. The New York Times publishes a front-page story. Intercepted Russian communications. Part of inquiry into Trump associates. The story includes specific details about the signals intelligence that was discussed in that classified briefing. He let that sink in. One day, Mr. Chairman. One single day between a classified briefing and that information appearing in the press. The pattern repeated. Kennedy walked through it methodically. Each example more damning than the last. February 3rd, Road. Classified briefing about Michael Flynn. February 4th. CNN exclusive with details from that briefing. March 7th. Classified briefing about Paul Manafort. March 8th. Washington Post story using information from that briefing. April 2nd. Briefing about Carter Page and the FISA warrant. April 3rd, Road. MSNBC exclusive about the FISA application. On and on it went 43 times over 2 years. 43 classified briefings. 43 leaks to the media within 24 to 48 hours. Someone in those briefings was leaking to the press. Mr. Chairman, someone with access to our nation's most sensitive secrets was giving them to reporters. Someone was committing federal crimes, violations of 18 U.S. Code Section 798, unauthorized disclosure of classified information for political purposes. Kennedy paused, looked directly at Schiff. Who do you think that someone was, Congressman? Before Schiff could respond, Kennedy pulled out another document. This one had official FBI letterhead with bold letters across the top. 302 interview report. This, Kennedy said, holding it up, is an FBI 302. That's the form agents use to document interviews. This particular 302 documents an interview with a former Intelligence Committee staffer. Someone who worked directly for you. Mr. Chairman, during 2017 and 2018, Kennedy began reading his draw. making every word crystal clear. Question. Did you have any conversations with members of the media about classified information discussed in Intelligence Committee briefings? Answer. Yes. Chairman Schiff directed me to brief certain reporters on classified matters related to the Russia investigation. Question. Can you describe the process? Answer. After classified briefings, Chairman Schiff would meet with me privately. He would provide talking points about what information to share and which reporters to contact. He specifically mentioned that we needed to get the information out to the public to counter the administration's narrative. Question. Did you understand this to be authorized disclosure? Answer. No. Chairman Schiff made clear that these were sensitive conversations and should be handled discreetly. He referred to certain reporters as friendlies who could be trusted to report the information in the right context. Question. How many times did this occur? Answer. At least 14 times that I can specifically recall. Possibly more. The room exploded. Reporters were shouting questions. Republicans were demanding Schiff be placed under oath immediately. Democrats were in frantic whispered conference calls with party leadership. Kennedy raised his voice slightly to be heard. This staffer was eventually fired. Mr. Chairman, fired for cause. The committee said for inappropriate behavior and potential security violations. The FBI investigated. But somehow no charges were ever filed. Curious, isn't it? He pulled out more documents. But we don't have to rely solely on one staffer's testimony because in the age of modern communications, Mr. Chairman, everything leaves a trail. Kennedy held up printed screenshots, text messages, metadata, call logs. These are text messages between you and Congressman Eric Swalwell. Also recently declassified. Also obtained through FOIA requests after years of stonewalling. He read from 1 April 5, 2017, 9:47 p.m. from your phone to Swalwell. Talk to our friend at MSNBC. Story will run at 11 o'clock. Watch it. Another April 10 from you to Swalwell. We need to coordinate on the next one. Make sure to emphasize the classified nature of the intel. Makes it more credible. Kennedy looked up from the messages. You were coordinating leaks with another member of Congress. Mr. Chairman, you were discussing how to make the leaks more effective. How to make them more credible by emphasizing that they came from classified briefings. He sat down the messages and picked up a legal document. Title 18. United States Code Section 798. Whoever knowingly and willfully communicates, furnishes, transmits, or otherwise makes available to an unauthorized person or publishes classified information shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both. Kennedy looked at Schiff over his glasses. 10 years. Mr. Chairman, that's the maximum sentence for each violation. And we're talking about 43 separate incidents. 43 federal crimes. Adam Schiff had gone from pale to ashen. His hands gripped the table so tightly his knuckles had gone white. One of his lawyers was frantically scribbling notes. The other had his head in his hands. These allegations are taken completely out of context. Schiff managed his voice strained. I was conducting legitimate oversight. Oversight. Kennedy's voice cracked like a whip. You call leaking classified information to friendly reporters oversight. You call coordinating with other members to get stories placed in specific news outlets oversight. You call violating federal law 43 times oversight. He leaned forward and for the first time that day, the Southern gentleman facade dropped completely. You weaponized the Intelligence Committee. Mr. Chairman, you took the most sensitive position in Congress. A position that requires absolute trust, absolute discretion, absolute adherence to security protocols. And you turned it into your personal propaganda operation. Kennedy gathered the documents, straightened them with sharp, angry movements. You didn't just leak to hurt President Trump. You damaged sources and methods. You compromised ongoing intelligence operations. You put lives at risk. American lives. The lives of intelligence assets and their families. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. But somehow it carried through the entire room. That's not oversight, Mr. Chairman. That's not even politics. That's treason against the institution you swore to protect. The word treason hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Too far for a formal accusation perhaps, but devastating nonetheless. 2 more Democrats left the room. The activists in the gallery had dwindled to perhaps a third of their original number. Those who remained looked shell-shocked. as if watching their hero revealed as the villain in real time. Kennedy straightened his papers, his composure returning. When he spoke again, that Southern gentleman courtesy was back. But now everyone in the room understood it for what it truly was. Not gentleness, but absolute certainty of victory. "We're not done yet, Mr. Chairman." That slight smile returned. "Let's discuss your relationship with certain donors. Let's discuss what they got for their money. Let's talk about Ed Buck. If possible." Adam Schiff went even paler because he knew what was coming next. And it was going to destroy what little remained of his reputation. Kennedy's hand moved to a different section of his folder. This one tabbed in red as if warning of blood. When he pulled out the first document, several people in the room recognized it immediately. A Federal Election Commission filing, the kind that lists every donation over $200, all public record. All perfectly legal to examine. "Congressman Schiff." Kennedy began, his voice taking on a new quality. Not anger anymore, but something colder. Disappointment. Perhaps the tone of someone about to expose not just crimes but moral failures. "Let's discuss Edward Buck. Ed Buck, as he was known in Democratic circles. Are you familiar with Mr. Buck?" The room went very quiet. The name Ed Buck carried weight, especially among those who followed California politics. A weight like a millstone. Schiff's jaw tightened. "I returned Mr. Buck's contribution after his arrest." "After his arrest," Kennedy repeated, loading those three words with meaning. "Yes, you did. In October of 2019. 2 weeks after Ed Buck was arrested by federal agents. But let's talk about the timeline. Shall we? Let's talk about what happened before that convenient gesture." Kennedy pulled out a series of photographs. Each one death-stamped. Each one from a different event. "This is you and Ed Buck at a Democratic National Committee fundraiser in Los Angeles. August 2015. He held up the photo. Schiff and Buck both smiling, drinks in hand. The kind of cozy donor-politician relationship photo that gets taken 1,000 times at every political event. Here's another California Democratic Party gala, West Hollywood. March 2016. You're at Buck's table. He was a sponsor of the event. Actually donated $50. More photos. June 2017. Your own campaign fundraiser. Congressman Ed Buck is there. Front row seat. Kennedy sat down the photos and picked up a campaign finance report. Ed Buck donated $2.700 to your campaign in 2016. The maximum allowed under federal law. He bundled more for your colleagues. He was by all accounts a prolific Democratic donor. Over $500 to various candidates and causes between 2012 and 2019. He paused. Let that sink in. But here's what makes this interesting. Mr. Chairman, here's where the timeline gets uncomfortable. Kennedy pulled out a news article. The headline large enough to read from across the room. Young man dies at Democratic donor's home. July 27, 2017. Gamal Moore, 26 years old. Dies of a methamphetamine overdose at Ed Buck's apartment in West Hollywood. That's in your district, Mr. Chairman. Your constituents. Your community. Kennedy's voice hardened. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department investigates. They find disturbing evidence. A journal kept by GML Moore. I won't read the explicit parts. But the journal describes a pattern of behavior by Ed Buck luring young men, mostly black men, to his apartment, providing them with drugs, engaging in activities while they were incapacitated. He looked up from the article. Activists in the LGBTQ community start raising alarms. They hold protests. They write letters. They contact elected officials. They contact your office. Mr. Chairman, Kennedy pulled out a stack of correspondence. These are letters sent to your congressional office between August 2017 and September 2019. 23 letters. All expressing concern about Ed Buck. All asking you to do something. All asking you to at least return his money to send a signal that this behavior won't be tolerated. He read from one letter. Dear Congressman Schiff, we are writing to urge you to return any donations from Ed Buck and to speak out about the death of Gamal Moore. Our community is being targeted. Young black men are being victimized. We need our representatives to stand with us, not with predators. Dated August 15, 2017. Kennedy sat it down, picked up another November 20, 2017. We are writing again to ask why you have remained silent about Ed Buck. More information has emerged about his pattern of behavior. We are afraid for our community members. Please respond. March 8, 2018. This is the 5th letter we have sent to your office. We have received no response. Ed Buck continues to be active in Democratic politics. Why Kennedy went through several more. Each one more desperate than the last. Each one ignored. January 7, 2019. Timothy Dean, another young black man, dies of a methamphetamine overdose at Ed Buck's apartment. Second death. Same apartment. Same circumstances. Kennedy's voice was cold now. Absolutely cold. The activists write again. The protests grow larger. The LGBTQ community in your district is begging for help. Mr. Chairman, begging for you to speak out. Begging for you to at least distance yourself from this man. He pulled out more campaign finance reports. But you don't return the money. Not in August 2017 after the first death. Not in January 2019 after the second death. You keep Ed Buck's contribution. You stay silent. Kennedy held up another set of campaign finance reports. And here's the really interesting part. Let's see how your Democratic colleagues handled this situation. He read from a list. Eric Garcetti, mayor of Los Angeles, returned $1.400 from Ed Buck in November 2017. 4 months after the first death. Kevin Delian, then a California state senator, returned $19.700 in August 2017. 1 month after the first death. Kyrsten Sinema, then a congresswoman, returned her contribution in September 2017. Kennedy looked up. They acted quickly. Mr. Chairman, when constituents raised concerns when a young man died under suspicious circumstances, when the community asked them to take a stand, they took it. They returned the money. They made a statement. He leaned forward. But you didn't. You kept the money for 2 more years through 23 letters from constituents. Through a second death. Through protests outside your district office. You kept Ed Buck's money until September 2019 when he was finally arrested after a third man nearly died and managed to escape. Kennedy pulled out the final document from this section. September 19, 2019. Ed Buck is arrested by federal agents charged with distribution of methamphetamine causing death. The evidence is overwhelming. The charges are federal. October 4, 2019. 2 weeks after Buck's arrest. 2 years after the first death. Only then, only when it became politically impossible to defend, did you return Ed Buck's $2,700. The silence in the room was suffocating. This wasn't about campaign finance violations anymore. This was about a moral failure. About a congressman who chose donor money over constituent safety. About a representative who ignored the pleas of his own community. Particularly his LGBTQ constituents. Particularly black men. Particularly the vulnerable. Until it was too late. 2 men died. Mr. Chairman, Kennedy's voice was barely above a whisper. But it carried through the entire room. 2 young black men, both in their 20s, both with families who loved them, both with futures ahead of them. And your constituents begged you to do something. They begged you to at least speak out. And you stayed silent because Ed Buck was a reliable donor because he gave you money. Because politics mattered more than people. One of the activists who had remained in the gallery, a young black man wearing a Justice for All t-shirt, stood up and walked out. His face twisted with disgust. Several others followed. Kennedy wasn't finished. He pulled out another set of financial documents. But Ed Buck isn't the only interesting pattern in your donor history. Is he? Mr. Chairman? Let's talk about your tech company donors. Let's talk about what they got for their money. He spread out FEC filings from multiple years. Employees of Google, employees of Facebook, employees of Twitter, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, thousands of dollars per election cycle. Coordinated giving from tech executives. Nothing illegal about it. Of course, people have a right to donate to candidates. Kennedy looked up and that slight smile was back. But let's look at what happened after those donations. Let's examine the legislation you supported. He pulled out bill records. House Resolution 4173. A bill to expand Section 230. Protections for tech platforms. Section 230 is the law that shields internet companies from liability for user content. You were a co-sponsor. The bill would have made it nearly impossible to hold tech companies accountable for anything posted on their platforms. House Resolution 5208. Federal funding for artificial intelligence research and development. The bill directed billions in government contracts to private companies. You supported it. You voted for it. And guess which companies got those contracts? Companies headquartered in your district. Companies whose executives donated to your campaign. Senate Bill 3647. Data privacy regulations with exemptions for large platforms. You advocated for it in committee. The exemptions were so large that Google, Facebook, and Twitter would have been essentially unregulated, while smaller competitors would have been crushed by compliance costs. Kennedy leaned back. The pattern is clear. Congressman, donations come in from tech executives. You support legislation that benefits those companies. More donations come in. You secure government contracts for them. More donations. Round and round it goes. He held up his hands. Again, not necessarily illegal. That's how Washington works, unfortunately, but certainly illuminating about whose interests you actually serve, about who you work for. And it's not the young black men in your district who were begging you to protect them from Ed Buck. It's not the constituents who wrote you 23 letters. It's the wealthy tech executives who maxed out their donations and bundled checks from their employees. The few remaining Democrats on the committee looked miserable. One was visibly taking off a Schiff 2024 campaign button and putting it in her pocket. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. Kennedy gathered his papers, organized them with that methodical precision that had become his signature move. We're not quite done, Mr. Chairman. We haven't even discussed your greatest performance yet. Your masterwork of manipulation and deception. He pulled out the thickest folder, yet easily twice the size of any previous section. Let's talk about the Ukraine impeachment. Let's talk about the whistleblower. Let's talk about how you manufactured a constitutional crisis based on a lie. Adam Schiff looked like he might be sick. His face had gone from ashen to a faint green. His hands were trembling. His lawyers were both whispering urgently, probably telling him to invoke the Fifth Amendment to end this, to walk out, but he couldn't. He was trapped. The whole country was watching. And Kennedy had him exactly where he wanted him. Let's discuss, Kennedy said, his voice dropping to that deadly quiet register again. Your star witness. The anonymous whistleblower you claimed to have no contact with. The complaint you swore you knew nothing about before it was filed. The investigation you insisted was entirely independent of your office. He opened the folder. Let's discuss how all of that was a lie. The atmosphere in the room shifted again. If the previous revelations had been damaging, if the leaks and the donors had been shameful, what Kennedy was about to present was something else entirely. This was about the attempted removal of a president. This was constitutional. This was the kind of thing that ended careers and possibly led to criminal charges. Kennedy pulled out phone records, page after page, of call logs, metadata, timestamps, all authenticated with official seals and signatures. September 17, 2019. Kennedy began, his voice taking on the cadence of a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. You appeared on MSNBC. You were asked whether you or your committee had spoken to the whistleblower. Your exact words were, "We have not spoken directly with the whistleblower. We would like to. That process is being set up." Kennedy looked up. Future tense. Mr. Chairman, we would like to. That process is being set up. Implying you hadn't spoken to the whistleblower yet. Implying there had been no contact. Implying your committee's investigation would be independent. That you were just learning about these allegations like everyone else. He sat down the transcript and held up the phone records. These are call logs from Intelligence Committee staff phones obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests recently declassified. They tell a very different story. Kennedy began reading dates and times. August 12, 2019. Call from Intelligence Committee staff to a CIA analyst. Duration 43 minutes. August 14. Another call. Same staff member to same analyst. Duration 19 minutes. August 16. 37 minutes. August 21st Street. 1 hour and 12 minutes. August 28. September 4th. September 7th. September 9th. September 13th. Kennedy sat down the phone log and looked directly at Schiff. 17 calls. Mr. Chairman. 17 calls between your staff and a CIA analyst. All before September 17th. All before you went on television and said you hadn't spoken to the whistleblower. He paused for effect. And Mr. Chairman, that CIA analyst was the whistleblower. The room exploded. Republicans were shouting. Democrats were fleeing. The media was in absolute chaos. This was the smoking gun direct proof that Schiff had lied about his contact with the whistleblower. That the whole impeachment had been coordinated from the beginning. That none of it had been the independent, courageous act of a concerned intelligence officer that they'd been told. Kennedy raised his voice to be heard over the chaos. But wait, there's more. That phrase, borrowed from late-night infomercials, somehow made it even more devastating. He pulled out printed text messages, each one authenticated with metadata. These are text messages between your staff and the whistleblower. Also recently declassified. Kennedy read from the first message. August 10, 2019. Your staffer texts the whistleblower. We need to talk about the proper procedure for filing a whistleblower complaint. Can you meet this week? Response from the whistleblower. Yes. Thursday work. Should I come to the Capitol? Another message. August 23rd Road. Your staffer. Have you started drafting the complaint? We can review it if you'd like guidance on format and what to include. Response. Working on a draft now. Would definitely appreciate your input. The most damning one. September 2nd. Your staffer. The complaint looks good. Make sure you file it through the IG's office. That's the proper channel. We'll be ready on our end once it's filed. Response. Will do. Thanks for all the help. Should I delete these messages? Your staffer? Probably a good idea. Kennedy looked up. They didn't delete them, Mr. Chairman. Or at least not thoroughly enough, because here they are. Your staff helping to write the whistleblower complaint. Your staff providing guidance on what to include. Your staff coordinating the timing of when it would be filed. Your staff preparing to receive it. He set down the messages. You didn't just know about the whistleblower, Mr. Chairman. You didn't just have contact with him. Your office helped manufacture the whistleblower complaint. You orchestrated it. You crafted it. You timed it. And then you went on television and lied about all of it. Kennedy pulled out another video clip, connected it to the room's display. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part came later. September 26, 2019. The first public hearing on the impeachment. Your opening statement. The video began to play. Adam Schiff at the chairman's seat, looking grave and serious, beginning to read what he claimed was a summary of the Trump-Zelensky phone call that had sparked the whistleblower complaint. But what came out of Schiff's mouth on the video was a dramatic mob movie-style characterization that bore little resemblance to the actual transcript. And I'm going to say this only 7 times, so you better listen good. Video Schiff intoned. I want you to make up dirt on my political opponent. Understand? Lots of it. On this and on that. Kennedy stopped the video. That was quite a performance. Mr. Chairman. Very dramatic. Very damning. It made President Trump sound like a mafia don shaking down a foreign leader. The media played it on loop. Your clip went viral. Millions of people saw it. He pulled out the actual transcript of the call. The only problem is that's not what was said. Not even close. Here's the actual transcript released by the White House. Confirmed by multiple participants on the call. Kennedy read the actual exchange, diplomatic, somewhat rambling, discussing corruption concerns, asking for cooperation on investigations. Nothing like the mob shakedown Schiff had performed. Completely different, isn't it? Kennedy said. Your version in reality. Your performance and the actual words spoken. He pulled up another video, Schiff being confronted about his fabricated reading. And here's what you said when people called you out on this. You said it was parody. That you were using parody to make a point. Kennedy's voice dripped with contempt. Parody. Mr. Chairman, at an official congressional hearing while investigating whether to impeach the president while the whole world was watching. That's when you decided to use parody to make up dialogue to put words in the president's mouth that he never said. He leaned forward. How many Americans saw your fake version before they saw the real transcript? Mr. Chairman? How many millions of people had their opinions formed by your parody? How many constituents called their representatives demanding impeachment based on words Trump never said, words you made up? Kennedy wasn't done. He pulled out lists, pages and pages of them. Let's talk about who you wouldn't let testify during your impeachment inquiry. Let's talk about the evidence you excluded. Let's talk about how you controlled every aspect of the investigation to ensure only one narrative emerged. He read from the list. Hunter Biden blocked. Alexandra Chalupa blocked. The whistleblower himself blocked. Anyone who might have provided contrary evidence or complicated your narrative blocked. And let's talk about the selective leaks. Once again, Mr. Chairman, your old pattern returned. Testimony that helped your case leaked to the media immediately. CNN, MSNBC, The New York Times. They all had the juicy quotes before the transcripts were officially released. At Kennedy held up a timeline showing closed-door testimony dates alongside media publication dates. October 15, 2019. Ambassador Taylor testifies behind closed doors that evening. That same evening, CNN has the story with selective quotes making Trump look guilty. October 23. Road. Ambassador Ivanovich testifies. Next morning, The Washington Post has an exclusive with the most damaging excerpts. The pattern held throughout. Evidence helpful to your narrative immediately. Evidence that might have complicated things buried in footnotes or excluded entirely. Kennedy set down the timeline. You turned the impeachment inquiry into a show trial. Mr. Chairman, you controlled the witnesses. You controlled the evidence. You controlled what the American people saw and when they saw it. You manufactured a crisis coordinated with a whistleblower, fabricated evidence, excluded contrary testimony, and leaked selectively to create a narrative. He pulled out one final document official with congressional seals. And eventually, Mr. Chairman, your own chamber held you accountable somewhat. House Resolution 521. June 21st Street, 2023. The resolution to censure you. Kennedy read from it. Resolved that the House of Representatives censures Representative Adam Schiff for misleading the American public and for conduct unbecoming of an elected member of the House of Representatives. The vote was 213 to 209. Along party lines mostly, though several Democrats voted present. They couldn't bring themselves to defend you. But they also couldn't vote against you. Political cowardice dressed up as neutrality. Kennedy looked up from the resolution. You were censured, Mr. Chairman, formerly rebuked by the House of Representatives for lying to the American people. Only the 25th member in American history to be censured. A rare and serious sanction. He paused. And you called it a badge of honor. Those were your words. A badge of honor. Being formally condemned by the House for lying. You wore it as a point of pride. Kennedy's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. But somehow it carried through the entire room. That tells us everything we need to know about you. Mr. Chairman, you lied about Russian collusion for 2 years. You leaked classified information 43 times. You ignored your constituents' pleas about Ed Buck until 2 men were dead. You coordinated with a whistleblower and then lied about it. You fabricated evidence at an impeachment hearing. And when you were finally held accountable when the House formally censured you, you called it a badge of honor. He stood up slowly. And for the first time that day, his careful control seemed to slip. His voice grew louder, harder, filled with genuine anger. You had the trust of the American people. Mr. Chairman, you had access to the nation's most sensitive secrets. You had a position of immense responsibility and power. And you abused all of it. You weaponized classified intelligence for political gain. You lied repeatedly to the American people. You manufactured a constitutional crisis. And you did it all while claiming to defend truth and institutions. Kennedy's voice grew even louder. You are exactly what you accused your enemies of being. Mr. Chairman, you are the threat to our institutions. You are the one who put politics above country. You are the one who abused power. And today, the American people finally see the truth about who and what you really are. The room was in complete chaos. Democrats were fleeing en masse. At least half the committee was gone. The activists had abandoned the gallery entirely. Even some of the media looked shaken as if they were realizing they'd been complicit in Schiff's lies for years. Adam Schiff sat frozen, his face white as paper, his hands trembling, his entire body seeming to shrink under the weight of the evidence arrayed against him. And Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana stood tall. His evidence spread before him like an accusation from history itself. His mission nearly complete, but we're not quite finished. Mr. Chairman, Kennedy said, his voice returning to that deadly quiet register. Let's talk about what happens now. Kennedy reached for his phone, held it up so everyone could see. He was reading from actual messages, actual statements, actual real-time reactions to what was happening in this room. While we've been sitting here, Mr. Chairman, while I've been presenting this evidence, the world has been reacting. Let me share some of those reactions with you. He scrolled through his phone. The Department of Justice Office of Public Affairs statement released 23 minutes ago. The department is reviewing allegations of unauthorized disclosure of classified information and will determine what investigative steps are appropriate. The House Ethics Committee statement released 18 minutes ago. The committee has voted to open a formal investigation into allegations of misconduct by Representative Adam Schiff, including but not limited to coordination with a whistleblower, false statements about that coordination, and potential violations of House rules regarding classified information. The Senate Select Committee on Intelligence statement released 11 minutes ago. The committee has voted unanimously to recommend suspension of Representative Schiff's access to classified information pending a full security review. Kennedy looked up from his phone unanimously. Mr. Chairman, both parties, both Republicans and Democrats on the Senate Intelligence Committee, agreed that you can no longer be trusted with classified information. He scrolled further. And your colleagues, Mr. Chairman, your fellow Democrats. Let me read some of their statements. Anonymous senior House Democrat quoted by Politico 7 minutes ago. If these allegations are proven, Representative Schiff must seriously consider resigning. California deserves better representation. House Democratic Caucus Leadership Official Statement. We are deeply troubled by today's testimony and are reviewing all the evidence presented. No member is above accountability. Progressive Caucus Spokesperson. We need answers. These are serious allegations that go to the heart of trust in government. Kennedy looked up. Even Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted. And I'm reading this verbatim. Accountability applies to everyone. Period. He set down his phone. They're running. Mr. Chairman, your own party, your own caucus, the progressives who championed you. They're all running because they know what I know. They know what this evidence proves. They know you're finished. Kennedy gestured to the nearly empty Democratic side of the committee. Look around. Mr. Chairman. Count the seats. You started this hearing with 14 Democrats on this committee. How many are still here? The cameras panned across the empty chairs. 3 Democrats remained, and they looked like they desperately wanted to leave but were too paralyzed by the unfolding disaster to move. They left. Mr. Chairman, your colleagues, your allies, the people who defended you through Russia, through impeachment, through the censure, they walked out because they finally understand that you're not worth defending anymore. Adam Schiff tried to stand, tried to mount one final defense. His voice came out strangled. Desperate. This is a coordinated political attack. A witch hunt designed to silence. Stop. Kennedy's single word spoken quietly, but with absolute authority cut through Schiff's attempted speech like a knife. Just stop, Mr. Chairman. But Kennedy sat back down, folded his hands on the table, and looked at Schiff with something that might have been pity. The evidence speaks for itself. 127 pieces of documented proof. Phone records, text messages, FBI reports, video footage, financial disclosures, congressional testimony, Inspector General findings, all of it authenticated, all of it verified, all of it damning. He paused. This isn't a witch hunt. Mr. Chairman, this is accountability. This is what happens when lies catch up to the liar. When abuses of power finally meet consequences. When someone who spent years attacking others for their supposed crimes is finally held responsible for their actual crimes. Schiff tried one more time, his voice barely above a whisper. History will vindicate. History will judge you a liar. Kennedy interrupted. History will record that you abused your position, weaponized intelligence, coordinated fake whistleblowers, and lied repeatedly to the American people. History will note that you were censured by your own house. History will remember that when finally confronted with evidence of your misdeeds, you fled behind claims of persecution. Kennedy gathered his papers one final time. The president isn't on trial here. Mr. Chairman, you are, and the verdict is clear. The committee chairman, a Democrat who had started the day expecting to watch Schiff triumph and instead had witnessed his complete destruction, finally found his voice. This committee will stand in recess. His words came out flat. Defeated. We will reconvene tomorrow to consider further action. He didn't wait for objections. He simply banged the gavel and stood up, walking out quickly, as if afraid to be contaminated by proximity to Schiff. Capitol Police officers approached Schiff's table. Congressman, we need you to come with us to the security office. You need to surrender your credentials and access badges. Director's orders. The walk from the witness table to the door seemed to take an eternity. Schiff moved like a man in a dream or a nightmare. His expensive suit rumpled. Now his confident posture collapsed. His face showing every one of his 63 years and then some. His staff had already abandoned him. His lawyers gathered their briefcases and left without a word they'd send him a bill. But they wouldn't defend him publicly. His political allies had fled. His media supporters were already working on pieces about how they'd been misled by him. He was alone. Completely, utterly alone. As Schiff passed Kennedy's table, escorted by security, Kennedy looked up and nodded the bare minimum of courtesy. And that slight smile, that Southern gentleman's smile that had haunted Schiff throughout this entire hearing, remained fixed in place. Kennedy calmly packed his documents into his briefcase, organized his notes, straightened his tie. He nodded politely to the few remaining people in the room, tipped an imaginary hat to the cameras, and walked out with the same dignified bearing he'd had when he walked in. Behind him, he left the complete wreckage of Adam Schiff's political career, the evidence of years of lies, the proof of systematic abuse of power, the documentation of betrayal after betrayal after betrayal. The Southern gentleman had brought his receipts and they had destroyed his target completely. The political earthquake triggered by Kennedy's methodical destruction of Adam Schiff sent shockwaves through Washington and beyond for weeks afterward. Within hours, cable news had completely rewritten the narrative. CNN, which had given Schiff a platform for his Russia collusion claims over 100 times, ran a special report, Schiff Allegations Separating Fact from Fiction. MSNBC, where Schiff had been a regular guest for years, suddenly featured panels of lawyers discussing potential criminal exposure for leaking classified information. Even Fox News, which would have been expected to celebrate instead, ran surprisingly sober analysis pieces about the institutional damage Schiff had caused to the Intelligence Committee. Social media exploded. Schiff lied trended worldwide for 3 days straight. The video of Kennedy's most devastating moments reading the phone records revealing the text messages confronting Schiff with his own censure was viewed tens of millions of times across platforms. But perhaps most telling were the reactions from Schiff's own party. The California Democratic Party held an emergency meeting and voted to strongly encourage Schiff to resign. Major donors closed their checkbooks. The progressive groups that had once championed him scrubbed his name from their websites and issued statements about how they'd been deceived. Within a week, 3 Democratic primary challengers had announced campaigns against Schiff. One of them, a former supporter, delivered a speech that went viral. Adam Schiff told us he was defending truth and democracy. Instead, he was lying to us, using us, and betraying everything we believed in. California deserves better. America deserves better. The investigations launched that day proceeded with unusual speed. The House Ethics Committee, under pressure from both parties, issued a scathing preliminary report. Within 30 days, the Department of Justice opened a grand jury investigation into the classified leaks. The Senate Intelligence Committee formally revoked Schiff's access to classified information, the first time in modern history. A sitting member of Congress had been stripped of clearance for cause. 3 months after the hearing, facing near certain expulsion from the House and likely federal indictment, Adam Schiff quietly announced he would not seek re-election. His statement was defiant to the end, claiming he was a victim of political persecution. But no one was listening anymore. The media had moved on. His party had abandoned him. His constituents had turned against him. But perhaps the most significant moment came 2 weeks after the hearing when a reporter from NPR made the drive to Madisonville, Louisiana to interview Senator John Kennedy at his home. Kennedy sat on his porch overlooking the bayou, a glass of bourbon in his hand, watching the sun set over the water. When asked if he took satisfaction in what had happened to Schiff, Kennedy was quiet for a long moment. "No," he finally said. His Louisiana drawl as smooth as ever. "I don't take pleasure in seeing a man's life destroyed, even when he brought it on himself." He took a sip of bourbon. "But I do take pleasure. I take great pride in defending the truth, in protecting our institutions, in showing that the system can still work when good people stand up and demand accountability." The reporter pressed, "But wasn't this personal? You and Congressman Schiff have clashed before." Kennedy shook his head. "It started personal. Maybe when he attacked me in that hearing room. When he tried to paint me as some kind of threat to democracy. That got my attention. I won't lie." He looked out over the water. But it became constitutional the moment I saw the evidence. The moment I understood what he'd been doing for years. The lies, the leaks, the abuse of power. That's when it stopped being about me versus him and became about defending something larger than both of us. What's the biggest damage Schiff caused? The reporter asked. Kennedy thought about that. The biggest damage he made: Americans distrust their own institutions. He made people wonder if their representatives are lying to them. He made citizens question whether the Intelligence Committee is conducting legitimate oversight or just playing political games with our national security. He turned to face the camera. That damage, that erosion of trust, that's what's unforgivable. Not lying about Trump, not even the classified leaks. It's the damage to the institution itself. To the relationship between Congress and the American people. That's what will take years to repair. What should happen to him? The reporter asked. Kennedy smiled slightly. That's not for me to say. To the Justice Department will make their decisions. The voters of California will make theirs. History will render its own judgment. He stood up, walked to the porch railing, looked out at the darkening sky. But I'll tell you what I hope. I hope this serves as a warning. A reminder that no one, no matter how powerful, how connected, how protected by their party, no one is above the law. No one is above accountability. Not in America. Not if the system works the way it's supposed to. The reporter asked one final question. What's the difference between you and Adam Schiff? Kennedy was quiet for a long moment, considering. Finally, I still believe in truth. Not narrative, not spin, not what sounds good on television or what helps my political side. Just truth, facts, evidence. He looked directly at the camera. Adam Schiff believed in winning, in advancing his career, in destroying his enemies. He believed the ends justified the means. He believed he could lie his way to victory and never face consequences. He picked up his burb and raised it slightly as if in a toast. And that's why I'm standing here on my porch watching the sunset at peace with what I did. And he's sitting somewhere preparing for federal indictment. His career over his reputation ruined. Knowing that when history writes about him, they'll write about a liar who abused his power and finally got caught. Kennedy took a sip. That's the difference. I can sleep at night. The interview ended, but the camera kept rolling for a moment longer, capturing Kennedy on his porch as the sky turned from orange to purple to deep blue. The sounds of the Louisiana evening crickets, frogs, water lapping at the shore, provided a peaceful soundtrack to the end of this story. Kennedy spoke one more time so quietly the microphone barely caught it. The Southern gentleman always brings receipts. Always. The camera faded to black. On that image, John Kennedy on his porch, bourbon in hand, the Louisiana bayou behind him. A man who had defended truth and held power accountable. Adam Schiff's political career was over. But more importantly, the system had worked, the truth had emerged, justice had been served, and America, despite all its flaws and failures, had proved once again that no one was above accountability.